This is the second and final part, where we discuss India's future in space. Let's start. GSAT-6, a dual-use satellite, was launched in 2015 and has a multimedia communication capability with 10 transponders covering the whole of the country. It may be mentioned here that the GSAT-6A, a military satellite, was launched a few months after the GSAT-6 to complement it and provide mobile communication services to the Indian military, but communication with it was lost due to power failure during its injection into a geosynchronous transfer orbit (GTO). Besides these current and near-future satellites, India has an electromagnetic intelligence gathering satellite or MESAT that was launched into a polar orbit in April 2020. It is equipped with an electronic intelligence (ELINT) package called Cortelier that allows the collection of information on ground-based radar as also electronic surveillance across India. Some remote sensing satellites with leading-edge sub-meter resolution have also been launched by ISRO as dual-purpose satellites, like the Technology Experimental Satellite (TES) in 2000, and the 4 cartographic satellites CARTOSat-1, 2, 2A and 2B in 2005, 2007, 2008, and 2010. With Israeli assistance, India has also launched 4 synthetic aperture radar satellites called RESAT-2, which were launched in 2009, before RESAT-1 as it was fast-tracked due to the 2008 Mumbai terror attack, RESAT-1 2011, RESAT-2B 2019, and RESAT-2BR1 2019, essentially to address terrorism-related threats. RESAT-2BR1 has an impressive resolution of 0.35 meters. Yet another dual-use satellite is the hyperspectral imaging satellite HISAT, which was launched in 2018 and is available for military use. The picture would be incomplete without a mention of Microsat-R, which was launched in January 2019 and 2 months later served as the target for India's ASAT demonstration. India's National Technical Research Organization (NTRO), according to open sources, uses TES, MESAT, CARTOSat-2A and CARTOSat-2B besides RESAT-1 and RESAT-2. It also operates with the IAF, 3 Very Long Range Tracking Radar (VLRTR) systems for missile monitoring and detection of spaceborne threats in aid of ballistic missile defense. Their ranges are 2,000 kilometers and beyond. These VLRTR sites are located at Udaipur, Bhopal and Balasore, in addition to one mounted on a ship INS Dhruv identified by its yard number VC 11184 only in some texts. As can be seen from this section, India has a modest array of satellites in place that have full or partial military application. So have other spacefaring nations, and it was important for India to validate a hard-kill option for taking on an adversarial space object for 2 reasons. Firstly, 3 nations had already set precedents, and secondly, one of them was China. Thus, it was imperative for India to carry out an ASAT test, Mission Shakti. As is the wont of all military technology, space capabilities are complemented by counter-space weapons, generally categorized into kinetic physical, non-kinetic physical, electronic and cyber. Kinetic physical aim to damage-destroy space assets and could be direct ascent missile launched from Earth to damage-destroy a satellite co-orbital when a satellite already in orbit is used to attack another, or ground station attacks on satellite control stations on ground. Non-kinetic physical attacks could be electromagnetic pulses (EMP), high-powered lasers or high-powered microwaves. Electronic attacks such as jamming and spoofing target a satellite's means of receiving and transmitting data. Cyber attacks can intercept or monitor or corrupt data or seize control of systems. These are different from electronic attacks in as much as the electronic attacks interfere with data transmission, while cyber attacks target the data itself and the systems that use this data. China has fairly advanced space programs, certainly ahead of India's, and it is therefore clear that Indian space assets are under threat of being attacked during any military confrontation with China. International space law, discussed briefly earlier, does not cover ASAT capability directly. The Comprehensive Outer Space Treaty is silent on this aspect, as are all subsequent and current initiatives on controlling weaponization of space, including a joint Russian and Chinese draft treaty on prevention of placement of weapons in outer space. Meanwhile, efforts by nations to acquire ASAT capabilities continue unabated, the last test being as recent as in November 2021 by Russia of a direct ascent variety. India's test in March 2019 was kept tightly under wraps until it had been executed successfully. A kinetic physical kill was achieved using anti-ballistic missile defense technology and, therefore, more politically acceptable than some other options outlined earlier. Besides proving the capability for Indian and foreign audiences, it served another crucial strategic rationale. If the world gets around to address ASAT arms control treaties and principles, India would be seated with those who already possess the capability, unlike the disadvantageous position it had in most nuclear parleys before it carried out its own peaceful nuclear explosion in 1974. However, having a successful ASAT test under its belt has no reason to be complacent. There is a compelling need to put in place a military organization with a mandate to defend Indian space assets, if required, through offensive action. In terms of numbers, Indian presence in space is not very large, but it is still significant and critical for the nation. The military assets described above and the civilian ones, especially remote sensing satellites and the dual-use NAVIC, need protection. In this light, the swerve towards building military space capability is a cheering process. However, there is a need to establish a space command so that there is a clear military mandate under a single command for better control. This will also serve the strategic purpose of space deterrence, especially with focus on China. India is still far from setting up the Tri-Service Space Command. One of the reasons is that there are not enough space-specific assets collectively with the three services to bring together under one command, as Indian policy has always been non-militarization and non-weaponization of space. Secondly, the government's plan to set up theatre commands has already run into trouble over the first aerospace-related command, the Air Defense Command, with the IAF advocating a doctrinal stance different from the other two services. Once that command is in place, it would set a precedent for the Space Command to be born. At this point, it would be pertinent to note the difference between a Space Command and a Space Force. While a Space Command would be a combatant command providing command and control over assets and personnel from the other three services as related to the space domain, a Space Force would be a fourth arm of the Indian military, or the fifth if Coast Guard is also counted as a defense force. There is also the question of budgetary allocation for a new command when even the current commitments by the three services are not supported by the allocations. With the current trend of defense budget in equation with GDP, the prospects of any substantial increase in availability of funds is bleak. The Naresh Chandra task force set up to review the recommendations of the Kargil Review Committee had recommended the creation of an aerospace command and the establishment of DSA as a first step towards that command. There is a need to work speedily towards organizing, equipping and training the command to be prepared to take on China's misadventures in space. A well-equipped and adequately manned space command, with intercontinental reach and the wherewithal to mount offensive missions as well as provide a fair degree of assurance in terms of defensive capability, is what is required by the nation. Our capability in building satellites and launch vehicles permits such an entity to be thus endowed. It remains for the government to accord priority to this inescapable national security imperative and make available the capital resources to fund it. The noble objectives of peaceful exploitation of space and the famous "There is room in space for everybody" statement by Yuri Gagarin, the first human in space, are utopian and do not appear to be realistic in view of the US-Russia-China rivalries. History tells us that the UN has no teeth to enforce treaties in spirit. The indebatable conclusion is that India must strive to keep space peaceful but at the same time gear up for military confrontation in space so as to affirm its ambition of becoming a global power. How and when India's Space Command gets established and how empowered it is will decide whether they deal with those confrontations from a position of strength or otherwise. Thanks for watching. Like, share and subscribe.